All right, we have joining us on Skype from Georgia, the Executive Director, Africa Network for Environment and Justice, David Ugola. David, good morning. It's nice to have you join us right now.
Thank you very much.
Now, Nigerians are very concerned when it comes to the issue of Abacha loot or recovery of loot from former president and even other politicians. Nigerians are really concerned about how there are no records or proper records and the naming of the figures totally of how transparent government is concerning the utilization of those funds. What are your concerns precisely?
First, let me thank you for these opportunities, really huge opportunity, and it's timely when Nigeria is actually participating in the 5th Open Government Partnership in Georgia, and then the House of Rep is carrying out this investigation. I quite completely share the concern of the House of Rep on the issue of transparency and accountability around recovered asset. But on this issue of the recovered asset regarding the $322.5 million, I think the federal government, under the leadership of President Buhari, have taken steps to allay those fears. And I think that the issues that are currently raised by the House of Rep need to be seen in that context.
All right, so how far do you think this probe or investigation can go without getting this cog in the wheel of progress where it could end up being politicized? Some people could say, look, this is just a witch hunt and what have you.
Well, if you look at the terms of reference for the investigation, it's clear that it's beyond the Swiss recovered asset, which is currently going to be distributed to poor people in Nigeria. And for me, I will share any perspective that will help raise issue of transparency and accountability. And the House of Rep interest on this issue is quite commendable, but they have to also put it in the context that what they are trying to do is not to undermine the ongoing process where Nigeria have signed an MOU with the Swiss government that have led to the recovery of the $322.5 million. That hasn't happened in Africa in the last 5-10 years. So if they want to participate in the process to ensure that what the money is claimed to be going to be useful is useful, that is good for Nigeria because the House of Rep do have oversight responsibility. But if it is an attempt to undermine the MOU already signed, then it becomes a big problem and it sets a bad precedent internationally. For instance, I quite agree with the House of Rep that their constitutional responsibility of appropriating resources must be taken into consideration. It's a constitutional issue that no Nigerian should go against. But however, on this particular instance of Abacha recovered loot from Switzerland, there was a court ruling in Switzerland that made it compulsory for World Bank to play a monitoring role. And in the process of negotiation, Nigerian government considered by agreeing to put the recovered asset in cash transfer for social investment program. And that's why the Swiss government cooperated with Nigerian government that led to the recovery. And so now midway to change that MOU, I don't think it's possible. What the House of Rep should be looking into is further recovery. And I would like to encourage them to also put their searchlight on further recoveries that is coming from the US. And we also have the Alamisia money that is also coming from the US. They also need to put focus on those issues, and those are the real key issues.
Okay. All right. The ad hoc committee by the House of Reps that intend to speak with former President Olusegun Obasanjo as well as former President Goodluck Jonathan technically amounts to probing, which certainly has never really been done before, to question former okay, I understand the line went off, but okay. let me reframe the question. Now, the committee plans to talk with former presidents and ask questions regarding how the former loots were executed or whatever they were done, or however they were used. This has not really happened before. How should they really go about this issue, especially the approach to the former presidents to really get results for this assignment?
I would be very happy if the House of Rep takes this very seriously beyond political agenda. If they technically want to see that the issue of oversight on recovered asset becomes a major plank of their engagement, that will really be remarkable, because there is no doubt that internationally, everybody, particularly after the Global Forum on Asset Recovery meeting in Washington last year, there is an international pressure on developing countries to begin to develop robust institutions that will guarantee that recovered asset is used for sustainable development. So if the House of Rep is carrying out this independent investigation, it's something that is welcome, particularly when you look the regime of Obasanjo, when the first Abacha one was recovered. What was it used for? That's some sour issue that's yet to resolve. And then during Jonathan's regime, there are some funds that was also recovered under Abacha, but none of these funds we can actually place our hand on that were properly used. They were not judiciously used. And so for me, this is not very good. It breaks trust between the country where these funds are kept and Nigeria, where it's receiving the money. And to increase trust and to build trust for countries around the world to continue to support Nigeria for asset recovery, we need to carry out this kind of investigation and put in place a system that will guarantee proper utilization of recovered asset. So if the investigation goes well and it is not politicized, and is with aim to see what our fund is used for, because this is not the first time that people are raising questions about how recovered asset was used. If you recall, even similar non-governmental organizations like SERAP, they've also actually petitioned the World Bank to explain to Nigeria what was Abacha's money that was first recovered in 2004, 2005 was used for. And no credible explanation have come out from the World Bank nor the Nigerian government. And if you recall, during the Jonathan regime as well too, ANEG, our organization, African Network for Environment and Economic Justice, also did an FOI request to the then Attorney General. No proper response came out. So we are very happy that the House of Rep is undertaking this mission, and we want to also appeal to the House of Rep to also invite civil society that are working on asset recovery. We will provide them a credible information that will help strengthen the investigation, but it should not be aimed at politicizing the whole work around asset recovery. What the House of Rep also need to do is to also strengthen their own capacity to understand the issue. Yes. Because knowledge is very important for you to engage in this process.
Absolutely. Of course, reports say some $1.25 billion that was actually repatriated under the Olusegun Obasanjo administration. And like you have asked, exactly what the reps are asking now is exactly how was that money deployed. And then there is the other issue too that the House of Reps wants to investigate as far as it concerns the Attorney General of the Federation, Abubakar Malami, over the 6 billion naira allegedly paid out to lawyers for a case that had more or less been concluded in terms of this $322 million that's just been repatriated from the Swiss government to Nigeria.
Yes, I think there have been issues on issue of fees paid to lawyers who have the Minister of Justice have procured to assist them on the final recovering of the Abacha 2. Which I think is a contentious issue. It certainly has raised the need for proper information for the society, for the country. And I think it would be good for the Minister of Justice to also provide Nigerian evidence if this is true. And it's true, if it is true, then he needs to explain to Nigeria why that happened. These are issues that really Nigerians need to know, because we're talking about huge amount of money, and Nigeria need to know why that happened. Because, and if you also look the whole discussion that is ongoing now on the further recovery from the United States, the US government is very clear on their position that they don't need immediate lawyers to get involved in the process. They just want to get the money, get back to Nigeria directly. And that, for me, is something that we must take lessons from. And so our Nigerian government, the Attorney General, need to explain to Nigeria what happens. And we need to take it from there, because that's the reason why we are also calling for public education. It's very important, because once you don't inform the people properly, and then there is misinformation, and it can be very damaging for the reputation of the government.
Yes.
All right. Some Nigerians are saying that instead of even going to ask the former presidents and then the former ministers of finance, central bank governors, that the government can write directly to the Swiss government or the reps can write straight to the Swiss government to request as to how much was released to Nigeria. How about that?
I think the amount that was released to Nigeria, we are now in Abacha 2. The Abacha 1, which was about $700 million that came to Nigeria. That's not in doubt. The amount that came to Nigeria is not in doubt. People are aware of that. The information is not difficult to access. I think what has happened is that there was an independent monitoring in 2004 and 2005. I was privileged to have led that process. It was the first of its kind in the world in monitoring a recovered asset in third world country. And I had the privilege to have engaged in that entire process. And what we discovered was mind-boggling. The money that came to Nigeria under Abacha law, none we were able to trace. Some roads that were claimed to have built with the money, we can't find the roads. Hospitals that were claimed to have been built, we can't trace the hospital. This was the story in 2004 and 2005. As a matter of fact, Ngozi Uwala, who was the then finance minister, do claim to the world that the money was spent before the money actually returned. So what was the problem is that there was lack of transparency and total accountability. So that culture of impunity that emerged that period is something that went into even Jonathan regime, and that's something that we've been campaigning against. That if we're going to be successful in recovering our assets stashed in Western Bank, we must put systems in place, and that's why we are very happy with what has happened with the $322 million that has just been recovered now. The World Bank is also part of the monitoring. Civil society and NET, we've just set up a project which will receive funding from DFID to do a monitoring across the 36 states that will be benefiting from the $322.5 million. This is very remarkable and is serving as a precedent globally. And that for me is a fallout of the Global Forum on Asset Recovery Summit that was held last year. And one of the key principles of that summit was that transparency and accountability, the involvement of civil society. And that's why the MOU that was signed between Nigerian government and the Swiss government is very remarkable, because first time in history, civil society was acknowledging that MOU. And that's why we have a place to stay now on this issue, which is very remarkable for the entire asset recovery process in Nigeria.
Yeah, finally, but are you concerned too that there is a possibility that the process of repatriation itself can be shrouded in, opaqueness and marred by corruption itself? So how do you really repatriate these funds, transparently without it being tainted by corruption too?
And that's why we are campaigning for the passage of the Proceeds of Crime Bill, which is currently sitting at the National Assembly. The fact that Nigerian government do not put in place legal framework that will strengthen their asset recovery architecture in Nigeria is something that is giving concern to the people internationally. We appeal to the National Assembly. If they want to demonstrate political will on this issue, they should expedite action on the Proceeds of Crime Bill. The Proceeds of Crime Bill provides the legal architecture for asset recovery in Nigeria, so that we can have an asset recovery and management agency that deals with this issue. You see, globally, countries are now beginning to put in place systems that will show that they are serious with the asset recovery business. Nigeria cannot be an exception, particularly against the background that we signed on to the Open Government Partnership Principle. And in one of our commitments in the principle, in the National Action Plan in Nigeria, is asset recovery legislation. And just to thank you again that Nigeria recently underwent a review under the United Nations Convention Against Corruption framework. And under the chapter asset recovery regime, it's clear that Nigeria asset recovery regime is weak, and we need to strengthen it.
Okay, David Golo, thank you so much for joining us, Executive Director, African Network for Environment and Economic Justice, joining us from Tbilisi, Georgia. Thank you very much, David, for talking to us.
Thank you very much. God bless you.